Hello, my favorite English language learners. It is your favorite English teacher here, Amy Joy. And in today's video, you are going to learn how to improve your academic speaking and writing by doing what we call hedging. So what is hedging? Hedging is making your statements softer by replacing absolute or very certain words like always, will, and definitely with softer words like often, can, and possibly. And we do this to show that we have considered exceptions or other possibilities to our arguments or research outcomes. For example, read these two sentences and tell me which is a stronger, more definite statement. Number one, using social media too much leads to depression and a lack of confidence in young girls. And number two, using social media too much could potentially lead to depression and a lack of confidence in young girls. Which sentence is stronger and more definite? If you said sentence one, you would be correct. In this sentence, we see the main verb leads is used in the simple present. And we use simple present to report about facts or things that are always true. So in this sentence, we are actually saying that using social media too much always leads to depression and a lack of self-confidence in young girls. But is this always true 100% of the time? Probably not. Even if you can think of just one exception, if there is one girl who is using social media and is not depressed and does not have a lack of self-confidence, then others can easily attack your argument and prove that you are wrong. By making your statements softer, you show your audience that you have considered alternatives and exceptions, and in the end, you actually sound smarter and more thoughtful. So if you are unsure of when to hedge, I have 3 tips for you. If you can think of just one exception to your statement, then you should hedge. If there is any possibility that you are wrong, then you should hedge. And if your statement is not 100% true 100% of the time, then you should hedge. And since we want to leave a little bit of room for exceptions or other possibilities, consider avoiding the following words: will, definitely, always, never, all, everyone, everybody, and the verb proves. This is all very definite in certain language that leaves no room for exceptions or alternatives, and instead we are going to learn how to replace this language with softer hedging language. So let's take a look. First are modals of possibility, and this is the most common way of hedging. Instead of using the word will, you can use can, could, may, might, or should. We can also use adjectives of probability and number, like the words likely, many, most, probable, possible, some, and unlikely. We can use these instead of the words all, everyone, or definitely. We have adverbs of frequency and possibility, like often, generally, typically, usually, rarely, seldom, possibly, potentially, and perhaps. And a lot of these can replace the word always. And lastly, we have some verbs including appear to, indicate, tend to, seem, and suggest. So let's take a look at 5 different examples to see how we might use these in real life. Let's start with an easy one. Number 1, when you study abroad, you will feel homesick. Here we see the absolute word will, and even though it is very common to get homesick when you are studying abroad, I am sure that there are at least a few people who don't. And so instead of using the word will, which means that it is true 100% of the time, we can say, when you study abroad, you may, might, can, or could feel homesick. Or, when you study abroad, it is likely, possible, or probable you will feel homesick. Or, when you study abroad, you will usually get homesick, especially at the beginning. Or, when you study abroad, you tend to feel homesick. Now, all of these words have slightly different meanings. For example, likely means that it will probably happen, whereas possible means that it is just an option or it might happen. So choose the hedging language and phrases that you really intend to mean, But again, try to stay away from that absolute language like will. Now, let's take a look at a business example. According to our calculations, we will definitely grow our profits by 10%. Now, since we use the phrase will definitely, this indicates 100% certainty. But if there is even a small chance that you will not reach your goal, it can be safer to soften your language so that your boss doesn't get mad at you later. For example, we can say, according to our calculations, we should grow our profits by 10%, using should instead of will. Or, according to our calculations, it is probable, likely, or possible that we will grow our profits by 10%. Or, according to our calculations, we could possibly grow our profits by 10%. Now notice here I've actually combined some hedging language using the modal verb could and the adverb possibly. So there are even more ways to combine these words to soften your statements even further. Or we can say our calculations suggest that we will grow our profits by 10%. Now notice here we do have the modal verb will, which expresses certainty. However, by using the verb suggests instead of something like proves, we are indicating that this is an estimate or an assumption and not 100% true. So in this case, will is okay. And similarly, we could also say, according to our calculations, it appears we will grow our profits by 10%. And before we move on to our next example, if you have found this video helpful so far, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel so you can keep improving your English with me. Now, let's take a look at a few academic examples. In a paper about representation in the media, you might say, based on the reading, movies always reinforce racial stereotypes, which lead to misunderstandings and prejudices against individuals from diverse backgrounds. Let's soften this statement a little bit. We can say, based on the reading, movies often, sometimes, or tend to reinforce racial stereotypes, which can, could, may, or might lead to misunderstandings and prejudices against individuals from diverse backgrounds. Or by changing the sentence a little bit, we could say, based on the reading, movies that reinforce racial stereotypes are likely to lead to misunderstandings and prejudices against individuals from diverse backgrounds. Or another option, based on the reading, movies that reinforce racial stereotypes seem to, appear to, or tend to lead to misunderstandings and prejudices against individuals from diverse backgrounds. So again, you can see here how we have replaced words like always and the verb in the simple present with some softer language to show our audience that we recognize that certain research findings may not apply to everyone and that we have been thoughtful and considerate of this complex topic. Let's look at one more academic example. If you are writing a paper on happiness, you might say, Harvard's research on happiness proves that people with strong relationships are always happier. Now here we see some really strong language like the research proves. This is a very definite or certain verb, and we will want to replace that. We also see that word always. So let's hedge this statement a little bit. We can say, Harvard's research on happiness suggests or indicates that people who have strong relationships are often, generally, usually, or typically happier. Here we've replaced the verb proves with suggests and indicates, which are a little bit softer, and we also replaced the word always with often, generally, usually, or typically. Let's look at another option. We can say, according to Harvard's research on happiness, people who have strong relationships are likely to be happier. Here we are using the phrase are likely to instead of the word always. And another option, according to Harvard's research on happiness, people who have stronger relationships tend to be happier. And this verb tend to just means usually or often. Not 100% of the time, but often. Now let's look at one last example that puts all of this together. This is the conclusion of a research study, and notice all the places that we hedge. It says, in conclusion, the findings of this research study suggest that the representation of minorities in the media may have a notable impact on viewers, though the effects are complex and multifaceted. While it is likely that increased and more accurate representation can potentially foster greater social inclusion and reduce stereotypes, it may not be the sole determinant in shaping viewers' attitudes and beliefs. Viewers tend to consume media content within a broader sociocultural context, and the impact of media representation may vary based on individual differences, such as personal beliefs and exposure to diverse experiences. Thus, while improving minority representation in the media can potentially contribute to positive societal change, it is important to acknowledge that it is just one piece of a larger puzzle, and its effects can be influenced by numerous factors. So in this conclusion, the authors are saying that based on the research, positive representation of minorities in the media could potentially lead to greater inclusion and have positive impacts on society. But by using words like suggest, may, likely, and could potentially, it is not making any guarantees, and it is not saying that positive representation in the media will solve all of the world's problems. In academic writing, it is important to have a balanced view of certain issues and recognize when there are nuances and complexities. And by using hedging language, you can convey this thoughtfulness to your audience and your readers. Now, before we go, I want to give you a quick opportunity to practice. Let's go. Number 1, the media content we consume shapes our views of others. Instead, we can say, the media content we consume can shape our views of others. You can also use may, might, or could, but here I just chose can. Number 2, if you live in an English-speaking country, you will improve your English. Now, while you would hope this is 100% true 100% of the time, there are some exceptions and people who do not improve their English despite living in an English-speaking country. So instead, we can say, if you live in an English-speaking country, you will likely or probably improve your English. There are many other options, but here I just gave you 2. Number 3, the study proves that writing down what you are grateful for makes you happier. And instead, we can say, the study indicates or suggests that writing down what you are grateful for can potentially make you happier. Notice here I combined can and even inserted the optional adverb potentially. You don't have to, but it is an option. And number 4, all people in the US speak English. Now, this is definitely not 100% true, so instead we can say most people in the US speak English, avoiding that word all and leaving a little bit of room for those exceptions. Great job! I hope you got all of those right and that you feel a little bit more confident and comfortable using hedging language in your academic speaking and writing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure you like it and subscribe to my channel so you can keep improving your English with me. Bye!